Hey, we're back with another one. This time we have David Miller. Wave to everybody. Hi, David. Good to see you. We haven't really spoke. I mean, I suppose we spoke last week briefly concerning something else entirely, but we haven't really spoken or trained for like 3 or 4 weeks at this point.
Us?
Yeah, you and me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But how's training going?
It's all right. It's been busy, so I've been having to kind of adjust a few things. But I've been able to get to my normal clubs. Been trying to implement a lot of the stuff that we talked about the last few times.
Right, right on. Cool. So we have a video that we're going to look at today, and we'll just jump right into it because I'm not pressed for time per se, but I do want to get this going. So just going to go ahead and open up the video, and here we go. So, right. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and press play, and then once we get to something interesting, we'll stop it.
Someone's trying.
Here we go.
Just disengaging from being so close to the line because they're trying to set you up. Move and also launch
So yeah, let's start. Let's just talk a little bit about what's going on. How are you kind of viewing what you're doing?
I know that Charles has an impressively long range, and he can shoot in on me really quick, gain my
Mhm.
sword, and take it. So I am being hesitant to give him my sword unless I feel like I'm strong. I know this isn't the footwork we talked about. I've been trying to implement it. I'm not quite at that point yet, but I'm just being maybe a bit overly cautious right here.
Yeah. So I don't. And let's talk about the footwork. We don't need. The footwork is less relevant to the overall tactical paradigm, right?
Hmm.
So like, the overall tactical paradigm is the should be at the earliest stage. Um, that should be your guiding principle. So what do I mean by that? So when you're fencing or when you're doing any activity, it's hard to kind of have like 10 things in mind,
Hmm.
right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, generally speaking, we do pretty well when we have one thing in mind, right? Like, what am I trying to do right here? And it becomes a challenge when the one thing that you have in mind doesn't account for all of the variation that you're going to experience and all of the different behaviors that you're going to need to be able to do. Um, and so you have one thing in mind, and then you're just kind of hoping that the rest of the stuff that you're doing is kind of on autopilot. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Um,
And I think that's where I found my footwork in this match. The thing I had in mind was um, I was trying to find the strong positions we talked about and getting out if I couldn't, and the footwork was on autopilot.
right, right. And so I'm here for that, right? Like,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
that's not a big deal at all. But what I would say is that you're, like you say, you are behaving very, very cautiously.
Yeah.
And there are moments where you could be pressing the action, or you could be taking Charles' sword in such a way that forces him to flee. Charles is also fleeing a lot. When I say fleeing, I mean fleeing the bind. He's weakening a lot,
Yeah.
right? If you see a fencer weakening a lot, what should be your impulse?
Um, Depends. If I'm in distance and he weakens in the Krieg, then I should, if I can take the shot, take it. Um,
Sure.
but if I don't know that
Well,
I
so
feel like
generally
there's
speaking, generally
yeah,
speaking, if your training partner is weakening a lot, right?
yeah.
Those are opportunities for you to close distance,
Okay.
right? Every time that your training partner weakens, or like either at a in the Sufechten, right? Or in the creek, if your training partner weakens in the Sufechten, that's often an opportunity to look to take as you enter, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then if they weaken in the creek, certainly an opportunity to look to begin a chase, right?
Okay.
So we're always, the goal is we get a strong position in the creek and we can start a chase, right? And once we start a chase, you're basically narrowing further and further the options that your training partner has until you get to a distance that's so close that they basically don't have any more options, right? They just have to let you hit them.
Yeah.
So when you're in the Sufestion, right? When you're outside of a distance where a chase is even really possible, right? Because if you, even if you looked at like take a strong position, your training partner can always back up, or they can, sort of yield and then look to take on the other side or whatever. So the chase hasn't been established yet. The chase doesn't really become established until you're strong in the creek, where the threat of them sort of taking back the advantage is no longer reasonable. And so, but here you guys are in the Sufestion and you're doing a lot of weakening, and that's not a big deal. That's totally fine to really kind of feel out your opponent. And so this is what I would suggest to you in these cases. What are you looking for from Charles?
So I can't remember this specific match, but generally when I'm fencing Charles, I'm either looking to try and take his sword like in a strong position to take his blade and be either on the inside line or in a strong position so I can come in with less threat of being hit, or I'm looking for him to expose his hands so I can get in there. I don't I don't know what I'm gonna do here. I don't feel safe doing deep target because he's really good at shutting me down on those.
Yeah. So what I would say is what we should be looking for in these moments, right, is what does my training partner like to do?
Yeah.
That's what we should be doing, right? Is that we're trying to, when we're in the Sufestion, we're downloading, right? We're downloading our training partner. We're trying to get a sense of, if you enter in a strong way, do they like to flee the bind by just pulling back their sword and not really responding? Do they like to flee the bind and then cut or bring their sword back on the other side? Do they like to flee the bind and bring their hilt to the center of their chest, or do they like to flee the bind and cut back down? All of these are, that's a set of 4 options right there, just 4. And yeah, we'll have the video. The video will be available for you to look at it again. But any of those options are going to give you a counter option that you can choose from, right? So as you put your blade on top of his sword, does he like to push your blade aside? Does he like to Durstfexen? Does he like to Zucken? Does he like to go to Kron? Does he like to Zucken and then come back down the same line? Does he like to target your hands? All of those things are viable. And once you've narrowed his options in your mind to a set that's manageable, right, then you can start figuring what you're looking to do after that. So for instance, if you put your blade on top of his and then he likes to Durstfexen, well, then you know that you can always step with the other foot in the direction of the Durstfexen and strengthen your position further.
Okay.
Right? If you've learned that about his fencing when you put your blade on top of his, if he just likes to pull his sword back and kind of hold his hand and sort of, his cross at his chest, well, then you know that you have an opportunity to move in with a tag hit to the hands.
Yeah.
Right? So you put your blade on top of his, now he pulls here, and now you're hitting him in the hands, right? So try and keep that in mind when you're in this sort of mode. If you're spending a lot of time in the Sufestion, you should be narrowing what your training partner is doing in your own mind, right? Look, perceive. You're safe to, right? You can be as weak as you need to be because you're in the Sufestion. You're safe to look. You're safe to get a sense of what choices or what options they prefer. Make sense?
Got it.
Cool. So let's move on here. So right there. So that was actually really good, right? So let's slow it down. So feeling out the distance. That would have been an opportunity to take right there. He left his blade out there for you quite a while. You could have just put your blade on top of his and then step towards him. We'll just continue going. Yeah. So the only thing there I would say is, let's look at this. How you got there. Okay, here we go. So you put your sword on top of his, and he weakens, right?
Hmm.
So you put your sword on top of his, and he weakens. And what do? Let's take a look. Or do you know? Do you know what
No,
you did?
I don't know.
Let's take a look. So he holds the sword out. You put your sword on top of his. He weakens.
I
And
pulled
what do?
back instead of shooting it.
You. That's right. You weaken as
Yeah.
well. Right? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It does.
And so it's just these types of things right there. Like, first watch him, see what he's doing.
Yeah.
Then you do things and see what he does in response to the things that you do. Right?
Okay.
And then you know the theory. You know the theory pretty strongly, right? And so it's really just a question of buckling down and like start applying it, right, in a systematic way. So yeah, if he would have pulled back, you had a thrust to the hand. Now he's obviously pulling distance, so you're probably not going to get a deep target. You're probably not going to hit with a Shisen in that moment.
Hmm.
But you certainly have a thrust to the hands, right? So
Yeah.
as you put, let's look at that one more time. As you put your sword on top of his, he pulls back, and boom, you're thrust into the hands. Right? Draw. Put your sword on top of his, he pulls back, and then you're thrusting to the hands.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't. You don't have time to do it as it stands because you pulled back yourself.
Yeah. I tried to
All
do a
right.
tag hit instead of a thrust.
Well, and it's not
Well,
just that you
I
tried to do
wound
a
back.
tag hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You pulled your
Yeah.
sword back, and that you pulling your sword back took up the amount of time that you would have needed to be able to chase effectively to the.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go back now. Do, 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 do. Of course, the angle is terrible, but that's okay. So this is good. Again, so you're pressing the action. You're pressing the action here. And you put your sword on top of his again. Right there.
Hmm.
And what does he do?
He tries. He pulls back like he did before.
Yeah. And does he do anything with his sword?
I don't remember from the. I don't
Well,
remember.
so we can just look at the
Yeah.
exchange. We'll watch it a handful of times. So we're
Yeah.
at 58 here. So we'll just do this. Right? Does he do anything with his sword?
He pulled it and his body back like this.
Yeah. So we're just going to call that he was weak and he stayed weak, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so your action. No, what did you do?
I tried to draw him up and then come under to the hand, but
Yeah, but
it
he
didn't work.
didn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't get drawn up, right?
No, he didn't.
Right. And so that's the other thing too, is it's like there's a little bit of anticipation going on.
Yeah.
You have the right sequence in your head.
I wasn't patient enough to see if it was going to work or not. I just went for it.
And yeah, exactly. And so this is why, and the KDF sources it's like explicit. It's all over everything all the time. Which is basically you set everything up by seeking the opening. Right? So you're always looking to thrust. You're always looking to dominate the sword, thrust, and then using Fueling, respond with the correct action. In this case, you had a valid sequence in your head, right? But you didn't commit to the thrust well enough to actually actualize his response, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it's sort of a similar thing that happened in the first exchange as well, right? Do you see how that's true?
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Right, because you put your sword on top of his, he weakened and you weakened because you kind of assumed that he was going to strengthen, right? And if he would have strengthened, you would have tagged to the hands, and it would have been great. But he didn't. He fled the bind again. The second exchange happened the same way. So let's
Okay.
continue.
Almost. But yeah.
So I like what Charles does here. He does that little bit of a clearing action.
Mm-hmm.
He clears your sword, and then he comes down the same line. That's a really useful. So if you're like cutting up from the right and then cutting down from the right, or even like cutting from the right, coming off, and then cutting from the right again, those are good ways to get a fencer who's kind of who's stagnant and not really sure what's going on. One of the things that you can do, just drilling wise, would be to get a training partner to throw sequences of cuts from you and either parry in long point or in plow.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you can have them cut from the 4 quadrants, and you can have them feller once or twice, right? I wouldn't say don't take it any further than that, right? Just say they can either do a direct cut from any of the 4 quadrants, or they can feller once. So that means feint a cut and then cut to the other side, or they can fellow twice, feint a cut to the other side, and then cut back down the same line.
Yeah.
And I would leave the drill there. There are plenty of ways that once you get good at that, you can know. Because here, the reason I bring that up is because you end up in a sort of stronger position, certainly a stronger position than Charles is here, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is you fled to, or you pulled your body out of distance, and so you weren't really to take advantage of the strong position that you ended up in, right? So we'll look at it one more time. So he clears with an unter, and then he comes back to the same line. Okay, well, yeah. So you just pulled your body away. So tracking on his sword, making sure that when he's cutting to the right, you're tracking with the right, with either in long point or in plow. Same on the, or excuse me, this is the right, this is my left. He's cutting from his right, your left. So, long point to your left, plow to your left. And then when you get used to that sequence and you get used to tracking your sword wherever their sword is, maintaining that strong position, pointing at it, then you're going to be, he's going to bring himself into distance, and you're going to end up in a strong position. So we'll continue. So what are we calling that?
As a double.
Yeah. So what could we have done there? Let's look.
I could have.
So again, I just want to see your point towards his sword.
Yeah.
Right. Just point towards the sword. Really get used to that pointing towards the sword all the time, because every time he flees, this is an opportunity. That right there is an opportunity for you to thrust him in the face. Right.
Okay.
If you're pointing towards his sword, you're right here. Let's go. Let's take it nice and slow. So the clearing, you can't thrust him because he beat your sword aside. So that's safe what you did. But then parrying and plow as he closes without pulling distance, you just drop your sword to the bottom and pull distance. Right? It was a safe way to get out of distance. That's fine. But if we're looking to get advantage, we have to get closer. So then we continue. We're strong. That's perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
He backs up a bit because he recognizes you're strong. You're strong again, and then you weaken for no reason, right? You weaken for no reason. If you would have maintained your strength, then when he weakens subsequently, which he's about to do, all right, hold on, same thing happens again. So we're here. Okay, so in this case, what should we do against the Dirk section?
Step into it.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. So go into long point or in plow on your right, catch that point with your cross, because he's already clear of your cross, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't get a second Durchwechseln from here.
Okay.
So you just step right in with your right foot to your right, put your cross on his point, and then you get to start your chase. Probably finish with the thrust because of the way that he's bringing his body forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're here. And he pulls back. Let's look at that one more time. So So how is he doing this? So he comes in. I wish this was 25. Unfortunately, Dropbox is only 50%.
Oh,
But
is it?
Now,
yeah, it's no big deal.
Okay.
So
now we both got rid
he does the Durstfexen, right? Now, because your point is at him, not over his sword,
Yeah.
right? He's basically gonna clear your sword with a winding action of his own, right? Remember, you don't want to. When do you wind? Do you remember when we wind?
Oh, that was the drill that we did. Off the top of my head, no, I can't remember the rules.
So we wind when they would be strong, right?
Okay.
So that's what the text says. So you don't wind when they are strong.
Okay. Okay.
You wind when they would be strong. So if you in the Durstfexen, if you got a strong position on his sword here,
Yeah.
right? When he begins his wind, he would not be able to push your sword aside, or he would have to go so far lateral to push your sword aside that you could work Indes and strike whatever you wanted, right? So, but instead, you keep your point on him, or you just free your point, which actually is fine because he's going super lateral anyway. So if you would have freed your point and thrust it in this moment, you would have won that exchange. But if you would have been strong, then you would have forced him into that situation and you would have actually been able to see it, right? Because you were just kind of fleeing and being weak, you didn't have the sensitivity to know, like, okay, from this position, he only has one of two options, right? He either comes up into my cross and then I get the thrust for free, or he does what he ended up doing here, which gives me the Indes action on the other side, right? As he strengthens. So let's see. So yeah. And the other thing is, if in the Durstfexen you actually thrust instead of trying to hit the hands, then you get your cross in front of his blade, and his hit doesn't land.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Let's continue.
now we both, now you got rid of free, you got
Ah, the banter. There we go. So again, this is sort of an opportunity to treat it the way that we were talking about in the beginning, right? So what are you trying to do with this action? Do you want to walk me
sorry.
through what you have in mind?
I'm trying to drop a parry on this side, and then I'm trying to come around to the other side once I see the reaction there. But he's able
Okay.
to cover it.
So you're looking. So you threaten. So let's go nice and slow. All right, come on. Here we go. So yeah. So in this case, your failure. So are you saying you're failing to your right? So you're starting.
I
with
was
an
trying
action.
to, yeah, I was trying to come that way and then go to the other side.
Great. Yeah. So that's not a bad idea.
Wasn't
Uh,
patient enough.
it wasn't patient enough, right? And really, you didn't give him enough of the failure to even respond to, right?
Mhm.
You can see here that he doesn't even see what you're threatening from your right. And often in these cases, you can just shoot the thrust, right? Like
Okay.
if you get your sword that close to him and you see that he's not moving his sword, just shoot the thrust, right? So we're here, swords down. So it's like right here, then you come back. So watch his sword. His sword doesn't even respond.
Yeah. Originally, I
Right?
was trying to get him to thrust in so I could do something from my low guard, but he wasn't taking it, so I decided to act instead.
Well, I mean, that's not it. That's
But
actually that's great, right?
I
Like that's
didn't
great.
like you said, I didn't give him enough of a stimuli to get him to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Right. And so I think that's becoming the through line in these exchanges, right?
Yeah.
Is that it's like you have like first intention, second intention stuff in your brain, but there's the fueling piece, right? It's the fueling and the index piece, making sure that you're connected to what your training partner is doing. And this is sort of why I spend so much time recommending slower fencing with people, especially athletic people, right? People who are athletic and have a lot of power. They fence with a lot of power. And by power, what I mean is explosive, especially movement in and out of distance. Is that when you fence with that amount of power, you can often perform really well, but at the cost of establishing that connection with your training partner, right? So that your actions can really be informed by their behaviors in response to your actions, rather than you're setting out a plan and then putting it on autopilot and seeing if it works.
Yeah.
Right. So the slower you fence and the more deliberately and the more in mind, like you have strength as a guiding principle. So like in this case, this is exactly what we're talking about. What I would have done in this situation is my initial action, right? I get to here. My initial action, as I bring my sword forward, so I actually like how you brought your sword forward there, right?
Okay.
You brought your sword first. Your sword move first.
Yeah.
Sorry. 120. There we go. Sword moves first. Sword moves first, right?
Yeah.
So that's great. But instead of once I get to here, I'm looking to see what he's doing, right? And I see, okay, he's done nothing with his sword, right? So what am I doing? I am getting strong on his blade, and I'm beginning to chase with a thrust. And invariably, to parry that, he's gonna have to go high with his hands, and then I'll take the unter after.
Okay.
Right? And it's just like every time I move my blade, I'm watching. Every single time I move my blade, I'm watching to see what my training partner does. And then the other thing is in a broader tactical level, right? What you can say is, okay, my training partner loves to fence very weak, right?
Yeah.
My training partner is not interested in taking my blade, right? The way that they, defend against my actions is by pulling distance, pulling their body out of distance. And the way that we deal with that, if we have a training partner who's refusing to engage my blade, is we just threaten with thrusts, right? So get strong behind your sword and move your body into distance, and eventually they'll have to do something about it. If we play weak as well, right? If we allow ourselves to fall into that game, then we're basically giving them options that they wouldn't have otherwise had.
Okay.
To be successful. All right. So right here, again, he's done nothing. So now I'm just going right into long point and forcing his hands up. Right. And he pulls distance. Hit misses. And let's move on. Again, weaken distance. So here, looking to strengthen on that cut.
Mhm.
Right. That's how I'm treating this. Get behind my sword. Instead, we withdraw. It's, again, not the worst option, but it's going to be hard to take advantage, right? So that was it. So that right there, that strengthening.
Yeah.
The problem is your momentum was going backwards.
Yeah. I wasn't moving into it.
You weren't confident.
No, I wasn't.
You weren't confident in your parry. So by the time you got the strength where you would begin your offense, right, your body is still moving backwards. So again, just those parry drills to keep you, okay, I'm going to practice. My opponent is going to cut down different lines. The reason that the reason that newer fencers tend to eschew strong parries is because they require you to commit to one side, right? And so if you get burned with that a few times, right? Someone cuts at you from the right, and then you parry to the right, but before you know it, they're already cutting at you to, they're cutting from their right to your left. Now they're cutting from their left to your right, and you don't get your parry off in time. You get hit in the face. You're like, okay, got it. I just need to be out of distance. That's fine, but we do need to develop the ability to parry those actions.
Yeah.
right? So that we don't have to leave distance, so that when they bring themselves in like that, we're able to retake our offense instead of being too far away. Right now, we're just stuck in the Sufechten again. All right. So okay. All right. So this is the best example of that action I was telling you about,
Yeah.
right? So you basically are doing your shisen, right?
Okay.
Right? So what you do here is perfect. You end up coming off. Honestly, you didn't need to. You could have just kept thrusting forward,
Okay.
right? So once you're here, sword moves first. I love it. I love it. Sword moves first. Listen, if you would have went to long point and just held structure, you thrust him directly in the face.
Okay.
Right? He's in distance. Your sword move first. All the mechanics of this are perfect. You anticipate it again, so you cut around early. But this action right here, you win this thrust. Let's look at it one more time. Boom. I love it. Oh my God. So the timing of this is perfect, right? Or the internal timing, I mean, with regards to the mechanics and the timing of the subordinate components of that thrust, right? If you go to long point, you win this action. You thrust him right in the face, right?
Okay.
And I would
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
make sure you aim under his, so not in the face, right? Ideally, you want to aim
Shoulder.
right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like below the shoulder, so in the chest, on the side of his sword.
Okay.
Right. With that action. All right. We'll look at it one more time just because it's so great. That was a good strong parry, though. I'll also say that was like you won that action, and it's just a shame that you had been moving back, right? Because you had
Yeah.
good strength, and you would have been able to retake your offense there. So, sword moves first. Yeah. I mean, I would have liked for that to have happened in Des, but let's talk about the good, right? So the
Yeah.
good was the mechanics of the thrust, right? Excellent. Having the second intention in mind, right? If Charles was to get his hands up, if he was coming up with his hilt as you set that thrust, let's look at it one more time. Watch Charles's hilt as you set the thrust. What happens?
He moved a little bit. He didn't move enough.
Did he? Yeah, I don't even know if he moved at all, honestly. So we're at 132. Let's go nice and slow. Ah, no! Ah! Oh, no. Here we go. 132. So 131, we'll say. $130. Hands move?
Very slightly, not enough.
I would say his hands didn't move really.
Okay.
Not. I would say, like, honestly, I wouldn't even call that his hands are moving at all.
Okay.
Right. So you win that thrust.
Okay.
Right. Now, if his hands, as you through that cut, if his hands come up even 2 inches, right?
Yeah.
Then the cut around makes more sense. Right. Because you have to. A lot of it is like you get a little bit of a signal as to what they're going to do, and you've already narrowed the options in your mind. Like, okay, this is how what he's doing right now defeats my action. And so I'm going to play it out. I'm going to predict out the rest of it in my head. Right. So
Yeah.
there is that degree of prediction, but you've got to get the stimulus, right?
Mhm.
You got to get the stimulus for it. And in this case, that wasn't enough. What that tells me is that your thrust lands at that distance.
Okay.
But having the plan in mind, super good, right? Let's move on. Also, a key here is that he parries wide.
Yeah.
Right. So let's look at that and see if we can't use that to our advantage later in the match, right? So we're here. Beautiful strong parry, love that.
Thank you.
All day long. right? So yeah, still nothing with his sword. So now
Yeah.
he cuts around. He parries. Look at how wide his parry is. So you know what
Yeah.
that's telling me? That's telling me that I can expect that later. So now I'm looking to double feller.
Okay.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you double feller, then
I would have had him
his-
wide open.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very difficult for him to be able to recover his position if he gets that wide, right? So that's just sort of that's more the downloading piece, right? All right, let's continue here.
Oh, I didn't say sorry.
Let me talk for a while.
Yeah, yeah, I love the slow mo talking. Okay, so the same mechanics, right?
Mhm.
Same mechanics. What's different about what happens here? Why didn't I squeal with delight when I saw
Because
this?
I pulled it back. No?
No, because you did the same thing the other time, right?
Okay.
So that's not why.
Sword didn't move
I did-
first.
No, sword move first. Let's look at it again. I'm picking on you now, but
Oh no.
you did it at a distance.
Okay. Well,
Right?
I
You're in the
wasn't.
Sufesten, and then you enter with that beautiful Shisen action,
Mhm.
but you're so far away it doesn't compel anything.
I didn't think I
Right?
was trying to hit him with that one. I was trying to present point forward.
Well,
And
but I
then
guess what I would say is just walk up.
okay. Yeah.
Walk up. I don't know if Brandon Fun is gonna watch this later. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But if he does, or any other of my fighting game compadres do it, like just walk up and block. That's it. Just walk up and block.
I gotta get
Just walk up
more
and
time to
block.
play some video games, I guess.
Right? Just walk up and block. Just walk right up into their face. They're gonna start freaking out eventually. Right? That's it. That's all you need to do. Here we go. So again, you have an opportunity for a strong position. Here, I would probably go for a Duplirin. Like, so when I enter there, so we'll say 40. So you throw the Shisen at a distance. Does nothing. That's fine. Now you see that you get closer,
Mhm.
right? What do you provoke from him?
Another parry action, a wide parry.
Well, not even. Like, the thing is, he's just weak. His sword is wide, but he's not even parrying your action because you never bring your sword to that side.
Okay.
So what you should be doing is, as soon as you get there, as soon as you bring your sword into bear, and then he's not doing anything, his sword is wide, step towards his sword, force him to pull his arms back, and then double to his face.
Okay.
Duplirin by double. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Right. So again, so let's look at it one more time. So you step in, your sword moves first. That's fine. You're at a distance, so doesn't really matter. Then instead of pulling your sword back and then cutting down to, I guess like you had it. Maybe you were doing that. I'm gonna tag to the hands thing.
I was trying to, yeah.
Right. So again, let's take a break for a second and we've seen enough. The through line for me is what? What's the through line for me here?
Not taking positions of strength, not waiting for my opponent to respond, and
That's the second one. That one right there is the most important one, right? Is that you've got plans in your head. This is what I'm going to do. They're the right plans, right? So that's like full stop. That's awesome, right? But you're not allowing Fueling and Indes to guide your actions.
yeah.
Right. And so what are some ways that we can address that? Right. So the first thing is get a training partner, right? And get them fence slowly, and get them to give you the various stimuli that you're seeing. Right. You can do it by having them watch this video with you and then show them what Charles does. Right. In which case, what Charles basically does is he withdraws his sword. His blade is out to his right side. He withdraws his hands to his chest. Right. And so, and those are moments for you to either step towards the sword, or as soon as basically his blade is no longer sort of oriented in your direction, but rather it's sort of less than 90 towards him, right? Then you should be doing a duplier into his face, right? If he's pulling his sword back to his right side the way that he is here.
Yeah.
So there are those actions, and then make sure, or the other one is that he strengthens, or that he covers, that he gets his point across the line to the other side, and that's when you cut the hands, right? You shouldn't be cutting to his right side unless his point has gone to your right side, right? So his point is on my right side, I'm cutting to his right side. His point is directly at me, I'm either thrusting through it, or if he's putting pressure, I'm stepping into it, right?
Yeah.
And his sword is pulling back. I'm either he's pulling back because I was strong, I'm doubling, or if he's pulling back and high, then I could potentially unter to his hands, or I just keep on stepping towards his sword, right? Force him to make one of those decisions, and then just make sure that you, so you've got the plan, you've got the correct plan, you've got the mechanics in mind, but drilling them as sets, right? So that's the real key here. When you're doing your drills, have your opponent give you various options, right? We did a version of that, right? Didn't we?
I think so. Yes.
When we were
Yeah.
in Louisiana, right? Where it's like, okay, you're going to go high with your hilt, so I'm going to cut the unter.
Yeah.
You're going to, you're going to strengthen across the hilt, so I'm going to do the zucken and tag to the hands, or whatever the case may be. What I see from Charles here is that he very, very rarely likes to get his point over to your right side, right? So I'm watching this video and I'm saying, okay, Charles does not bring his point over to the other side, even when he Durchwechselns. How does he respond with the Durchwechsel?
He usually does it, I don't know, either my hands or my arm.
So what he does is he takes his point, he Durchwechselns. So now he's pointed to your right side, right?
Yeah.
And then he immediately follows up with this action.
Oh, it's his favorite move is Boar's Tooth in Fury system. Yeah.
Right? Well, so what does that tell you? That tells you
That's
that
coming.
it tells you that he doesn't like having his point on your right side, his left.
Okay.
Right? And so what are the actions that we're going to perform against someone who fences that way? We're either going to cut underneath the arms, we're going to thrust to the chest, we're going to wind against pressure, or we're going to double when he withdraws his sword. Right? Double as in duplier.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you don't even need to think. You don't need to think about anything else. And then the only other thing is if he withdraws with his hands that way, and you have your point forward, thrust to the hands. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So he's got a lot of opportunities for those thrusts to the hands. Let's continue here. We got another few minutes that we're going to be able to do this. So this is good. Strong position, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell the kind of pressure that he's giving right here.
I think he beat my blade to the side.
Well, so because it's Charles, I guess my expectation would be that he's not going to put a lot of pressure, that he's going to yield very quickly.
Okay.
Right. That's sort of my sense. It looks like you're pretty strong. If he does nothing, you should probably step either towards him or towards his blade, depending on the pressure. In a long point, with your point pointed across his arm or across his sword towards his shoulder. But let's see if he withdraws his point the way that I expect him to. Oh no! Yeah, he did. Look, so right there, instead of cutting, so we're here. Right there. Yeah.
And thrust from there.
Yeah, you could have thrusted. So let me show you I think I have a video of something similar. Let's do this. I don't know if you've seen this video, but if you haven't, then it's a little outdated, but I think most of the stuff in there is pretty good. Let me put that away for a second. Let me share a different screen. All right. So here we go. So and we'll go to 25% here, or 50, I think will be fine. Can you see this okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a video I made like what, 6 years ago or something, but we'll just take a look at the first one here. This is a sort of experimental rule set that I was looking at where
Okay.
only these types of actions would count. But so here you have the Shisen that we've done a bunch of times. Right?
Okay. Yeah. You took and then you just kept going.
Yeah, basically, it's like I know that their structure is insufficient, so I'm just going to keep my sword forward. This Auschwitz, and let me look for the Zorn Ort, because that's the one. You turn. Auschwitz variation. This might be it. Hold on. That's the other side. Where are we at here? I don't know where it is. It's got to be. Oh, Ansatz. There we go. Found it. Well, so there's two here. So there's the Absetzen, right?
Okay.
That makes sense?
That's the one that I actually tend to get on people.
Well, but so look at the detail, right? The detail is beginning with your sword strong, right?
Yeah.
So what you can't really see from this angle, but you can see in the way that my training partner's sword is being pushed off to the side.
Yeah, I can see.
Right?
You've
That
got the
my
strong angle on his
structure
sword.
is my structure is aligned away from him. It's over his shoulder right now.
On his sword.
Right?
Yeah.
On his sword, towards his sword. So I'm being strong on his sword. And it's only when I collect on the cross that I bring my point back inside.
Yeah.
Right? But then this is the one that I wanted to show you. This one right here. Of course, taking this sweet time. Right there.
Okay.
Do you see what's happening here?
You found the structure, and then you pressed into it.
Well, but watch what my training partner's doing, right? So watch how they
he starts to
arms.
weaken.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm here. I get the strong angle. He pulls back, and I go with him.
I've been noticing in my fencing that I will find those moments of strength, and then I will not have the familiarity with them to be able to act on them in time. So I'll see it, like I'll go, oh, this is that moment, and then the moment's gone. But I'm starting to recognize it more often.
Right. So I think it does go back to, because here's the thing: if you fix what we've been talking about, right, which is just the idea of like, okay, I'm going to use structure to oppose my opponent's sword, which is going to make it so that I have the bandwidth to process what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So step one is use structure. Then you don't have to push. You don't have to work to oppose. Step two is you've freed up a ton of bandwidth. Watch what they're doing. Right. Identify what they're doing and connect. Like eventually, step three is start connecting your actions to what they're doing. Right. But before you can do that, right, before you can do anything, first you have to be confident in your defense. You have to be confident in your ability to oppose with structure so that you have the bandwidth. And then you have to start seeing the thing and identifying it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Right? My son got home from wrestling the other day, and it was like one of the proudest moments of me as a father, right? Is like my son came home and he said, yeah, I went with the coach, because he started a new wrestling club and he's had some success against the other kids at the club. But he I don't know if he asked the coach or the coach asked him if he wanted to wrestle. And so the coach just whooped his ass, right? It was like it was great. But I asked him, I said, what did he get on you? And he said he got a single leg, right? I said, what happened? He said, I posted on the head, he got a single leg, right? Proudest moment I've ever had as a father, right there, right? Because what might he have said?
He was better. He's more experienced. This, that, and the
I,
other.
I don't know, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Right? Any of those things would have been not. I mean, would have been fine, but like, what did that say about what was happening? Right?
He knew what was going on and could identify the issue, so he could work on it.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So like, and not only that, but he was paying attention. He wasn't just absent-minded.
Yeah.
In the bout, right? Like he's like watching to see what happens. He said, okay, this guy, Tommy had a head post, and he just ducked, right? And then he swung the single leg. And I was like, well, why didn't your head post keep him from moving in? He's like, well, it happened really fast. I wasn't prepared for it to happen so fast. And, the other part of it is he wasn't being active with his defense, right? Like the head post in wrestling is functionally fencing and long point, right? Like if you, if I put my hand on your head,
yeah,
and I'm being active with my hand on your head, then if you try and get to me, you shouldn't be able to get to me.
Yeah, you can go with it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I can use fueling, and as you change your angle, I can change my angle, and I can continue pushing you away, right? So it's like, okay, got it. You had your head post. Maybe you were anticipating. You were thinking about like what you were gonna do based on the thing. But then when he when he just moved out of the way of your head post, you forgot to use fuel and keep your defense in the way, right? But I don't even care about that, right? Because that's something that we can fix, and we can only fix it because he was developing the awareness of like, okay, I had a head post, he just ducked and took a single leg. And so what are the, 3 different ways that he can approach that? Number 1, if I have a head post, stay active. If he ducks, then I keep my hand on his head so that he can't get, or maybe I go to a front headlock. Or maybe as soon as he leaves my hand, I get inside position and down blocking and come up with underhooks, right? Those would be, I'm giving you the wrestling analogy right now, but it could be a fighting game analogy, right? It's like, okay, the round starts and he jumped in. Well, okay, why was his jump in successful? Because I fireballed, right? The round started, I fireballed, he jumped in, expecting me to fireball, and he was able to get a big combo, right? Or a big conversion off of it, right? What does that tell me? Next round start, don't fireball, right? If you fireball again, then but if like you say, if my mentality after the match is, why did he, how did he win? Well, he was just better, or there was lag, or
lag. There was lag.
Or he rage quit, or he was a smurf. That's how he beat me. He was a smurf, right? Or I would have beat him right. So like if that's my mentality, I'm never gonna, right? No.
Yeah.
I fireballed. Why did I fireball? Well, opening a round with a fireball isn't even necessarily a bad move, right? But you got to know after you do that, like, okay, got it. This guy is expecting me to fireball. Right? I have to. And so, rely on your defense, have a strong position, begin to identify what your training partner is doing, right? Looking at Charles, what I'm seeing a lot of is I'm seeing a lot of bringing his sword back here, right? Bringing his sword forward, there's flexing, bringing it back here. Bring it forward, there's flexing, bring it back. Like that's a super easy game plan for you to wrap your head around, right? And then knowing what are the options from those 3 or 4 stimuli. What I would say, if I was fencing you, what would I assume your game plan is going to be?
Go in fast and try and feint or change targets.
Feint once, cut around to my right side.
Yeah.
Right. So how would I mitigate that if I was your training partner?
You would do what Charles did and wait for the feint, or
Well, Charles didn't always wait for the feint. Charles didn't always presume. Like you hit him a few times, right? So the double was as much his fault as it was yours, and then you got a nice clean hand hit on him the other time, right? But what I would say is, I would get strong. First of all, I would get strong on your first action,
Yeah.
right? So that I would force the feint, right? Or that would force you to come around
Yeah.
to the other side.
And then
And
while
then I
I'm
would,
changing, you'd be able to come in on me.
yeah, well, yeah, I would parry. I could either, if you allowed yourself to get close enough where I could start my chase in your initial weakening, like we saw in
Yeah.
the Lancets in the video I shared. But if you're doing it from the distance that you were kind of doing it from, I would just parry and plow, right? I would just allow you to get here. And in fact, I don't know what you remember from our bout, right? When we fenced and
Yeah.
Louisiana the last time, but I did that a few times against
No,
you,
I remember
right?
that.
Like there was a thrust in the shoulder here that I just came to right plow and then thrusted right in the shoulder. There was also several actions where I was here, you cut around, and I basically just parried. I just strengthened by flexing my wrist this way, getting my point this way, and then cutting to the head, right? Both times I was able to mitigate the action to the outside, right? Depending on the distance. If the distance is such where I can parry in long point and then I have a clean shot, fine. If not, I have to come to plow, then I get the thrust, right?
Yeah.
And so, the way that you use that is like, okay, when I'm fencing someone, I am downloading them. What the hell did they do?
Be a
Right?
more active watcher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I use the term listener, right?
Listener, yeah.
Right. Be a more active listener. Like pay attention to what they're saying, what they're doing. And maybe you say like, okay, after every bout that regardless of how my actions score, or regardless of what they do, I want to take 3 ways that I recognize they behave. Right? The fighting game analogy. If I jump in, do they anti-air? Okay, got it. They anti-air. So be careful jumping in. Right? Like I learned so much about the bout just by keeping track of what happened. Right? And so that's what I would say for that.
Okay.
Any more questions?
No, I think I'm gonna go back and just rewatch this and a couple other ones. Doing more reviews on my own would be more helpful to myself because I was noticing those things too as you were saying them. So, noticing patterns I'm falling into and hoping to break them.
Yeah. I think that just having the experience of like sitting down and being like deliberate in your analysis of like what's happening.
I find that I do a lot of video review, but it's for editing, so I don't get to have that time of critical analysis that I should be putting into it. So
Right.
I will
Okay.
focus on that more.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me do this. Let's see what's going on here. And thanks everybody.